Hello, my fellow Pelicans. So, the newest Ask Abernathy question comes from Bonnie Kallis. And Bonnie asks, what would you do in the case of no fault divorce to ensure that non working spouses still have access to legal representation in order to get a divorce from somebody that is abusive or unfaithful or otherwise at fault? She brings up an excellent point. And the idea behind repealing no fault divorce laws is not that we want to disincentivize divorce from the spouse that's out at fault to the detriment of the injured innocent spouse. That's not the point. The point of it is for protection for the innocent spouse and mostly for protection of the children. The problem that we have with unilateral no fault divorce is that it allows people to abandon their families, loving, faithful husbands, wives, etc., and with little consequence a lot of the times. And I've seen in my own life, sadly, where wonderful, loving fathers were essentially deprived of their own home. They kicked out of their own home and deprived of access to their children except on weekends and holidays because the mother of their children, their wife, decided that they didn't want to be married to them anymore. Not because they were unfaithful, not because they were abusive, not for any reason other than, in one case, this person wanted to be with someone else. And the damage that that did to the children, of course, was irreparable, but it was also incredibly damaging to that innocent spouse. So, yeah, the last thing I want is for people who are in such arrangements to be stuck in such arrangements because they can't afford any way out. And because the non-injured spouse, the perpetrator, has a disincentive to finance the divorce themselves, because they would actually be held accountable for causing that harm. They would need to pay things like alimony, and they would lose marital assets, etc. So, what would I do about this? It's a great question. I would like to see the idea of Miranda rights and the right to an attorney applying in cases where there is a spouse that is in a marriage where the offending spouse has done something that qualifies as out fault, and therefore the innocent spouse is entitled to divorce. And that's only available. We have the whole concept of at fault divorce. If divorce is something that people can just get on a whim because they want it, then we've totally lost any ability to make a claim for the right to legal representation. But because we would have fault to establish, if that person, so the injured spouse that has a abusive, neglectful, abandonment issues because their spouse has abandoned them, is unfaithful, for example, if the innocent spouse goes to a legal aid situation and says, I need help paying for representation in order to end my marriage from somebody who has violated the vows because they are at fault, then that needs to be covered. Now, the problem is with legal aid, they are completely bogged down with so many different cases for so many different reasons. In the case of the Miranda case that established the famous Miranda rights for criminal court, you are entitled to a lawyer even if you cannot afford one. So we recognize in the United States that there is a necessity to provide lawyers in order to assure justice for those that are accused before they are potentially deprived of their freedom, their property. I believe that that could apply here. I believe that there should be a special set aside fund, like the equivalent of a public defender for women, men, whoever might not be working, may not be able to afford representation in domestic court. So they are not essentially stuck in these bad marriages with bad people until the one that can afford to initiate the divorce initiates the divorce, and probably won't, because with at fault divorce, they know that they would be held accountable for it. So the last thing we want to do is trap people in these marriages just because they can't afford to get out of them. And I believe that having some sort of entitlement program where you plead your case and you can make a pretty compelling argument for why this person is at fault, you would be able to have free representation paid for by this government program. I look forward to anybody's thoughts on this idea, and I look forward to more of your questions. Thank you.